guys, welcome to the Elements Wellness Podcast. We are a group of therapists and coaches that run wellness content and retreats to unleash your you that exists boldly, masters emotions, lets go of thoughts that weigh you down, ignites your inner power, and expands your soul.
Welcome, everybody, to the Elements Wellness Podcast. I'm Matt Whalen. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I deal a lot with trauma and interpersonal relationships. And with me, I have Stephanie Legendre. She works with trauma through the lifespan, from children on up to adults, also working strongly with attachment. And so today, I really wanted to dive into this conversation about emotional fitness. That's something that's really intriguing to me. I know you're kind of an expert in it, and so I want to dive into that little brain of yours and try to figure out what you have to say on the subject. Emotional fitness is something that I know I have been trying to work on and struggling. So I'll definitely have my questions, and I'm going to make this as challenging as I can so that everybody can kind of understand this topic of emotional fitness. And so let me first start by asking you, what is emotional fitness to you?
So for me, emotional fitness is really just the core of resiliency. It is training the brain to basically work through hard things and creating some sort of resiliency in that brain. So it's almost like working out for emotional regulation.
Okay, I can kind of get that analogy. I do
meathead of the brain.
The meathead of the brain. I like that. Okay, so let's say somebody is just kind of first introduced to the subject of emotional fitness. How do I get started in working out my brain?
Well, I think we have to look at first, like, what's your goal? Because I feel like when people, working out, people have a goal, they're going to want to do the hard things to get to that goal. So whether it be, I want to stop having panic attacks, or I feel depressed, or I'm addicted to social media, or I'm addicted to my screens, or I feel like I'm, shopping or working on my looks and it's just never enough. And it's just this like diminishing return, or, filling a bucket with holes. Whatever the goal looks like, figure that out, because when it gets hard, you really want to know what you're working for.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. So let's just take me, for example.
Okay.
The short of my story is that I was abandoned by my mother. So I have a pretty deep abandonment wound. And that has kind of been pervasive throughout my life.
Yeah.
And it's translated into a lot of relationships, for sure. It's kept me at bay. It's kept me guarded, and anxious that people will leave. And, whether I create that or not, I don't really know. But I know it's something that is pervasive for me. And when I feel it very intensely.
Sure.
And when I get to that space, it's really hard to get myself out of that. So how can emotional fitness help me through that really big trauma wound of abandonment?
Yeah, so abandonment's hard, right? Because it's like the primal wound. And for me, I work with a lot of adopted kids. So I see the pain it's intense and it's pretty real for them, right? It's really going to be picking the small things and not the big things. I think we go too hard with it. So we go, okay, in the midst of this fight that I'm having with my loved one, I'm now feeling these thoughts and these feelings of intense abandonment, or I'm feeling as if, yet again, people are going to hurt me. Whatever the thoughts and the emotions are coming in that moment, that's not the moment to work on emotional fitness, because it's like saying, let's go to the gym and we're just gonna like squat 400. Your things are gonna tear, like things are gonna break, man. And I think that I see two types of different people, right? I have the people that don't want to move at all because they feel safe in, just not moving. Like, I'm never gonna fail if I take a step forward, right? I'm just gonna stay stuck. And then I see the other client, which I see those more often, is I'm going to go for the big goal. I'm going to go for the big thing and I'm going to try to work in that. And then they set themselves up to fail because, that is a deep wound that you're trying to work on when triggered. And so I tell people like we need to start doing more preventative work. And surprisingly, people don't want to do that work.
Mm.
And that's what I see all the time. And I think from a brain perspective, I get why. The reason they don't want to do the work is because when you're triggered, now you're like, oh crap, I'm messed up. I got to figure this out. Or, oh crap, these thoughts are not working for me anymore. But once that emotion fades and you go back to everyday life and you go to work and you do your thing and you go have fun on the weekend, those thoughts are kind of on a shelf.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm asking you to do work then. I'm
Mm.
asking you to do the hard
Mhm.
thing then. And that's really
Mhm.
hard because I'm asking you to take it off the shelf and look at it and do the work. And you're like, no, 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 no. I want to live my life, not you, but most of my clients. I want to live my life not doing the preventative work. But when now it's off the shelf, tell me what to do. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had, a friend of mine call me and go, I have these really intense panic attacks. What do I do in the moment when the lights are bright and I'm in the middle of, working there? I get really triggered and then I get into these panic attacks and I need to know what to do in that moment. And I'm like, oh, there's nothing you can do in that moment.
Too far gone.
She was like, oh, seriously. And I want help. And I'm like, oh, in that moment, there's nothing you can do. And it's funny, but it's not funny. Right. But I think that's when people want the help. And it's
Yeah.
like, you've got to do the work, right? Because panic attacks is just emotions built up. Emotions are energy, right? And they're coming out. And
Sure.
so if you're not doing the work every day, like you're not watering the plant every day, and when the leaves are dead and it looks like wilted, and you're like, I want to save this plant, you make it harder on yourself. There's
Yeah.
a lot more work there to save that plant. Just water it a little bit every day.
That makes sense. So I almost picture like the Karate Kid, the original, the OG Karate Kid with Ralph Macchio, right? And Mr. Miyagi has him washing
Mm,
cars,
mm-hmm.
right? And that's what you're telling me emotional fitness is. It's the washing cars. And in the moment of washing cars, like, I don't want to wash cars. I want to learn how to fight.
Yes. Okay, that's such a good metaphor. Exactly. Yeah.
So you're telling me to wash
Yeah.
cars,
Wax on, wax off, man.
but I don't want to wash
Right.
cars.
No one does.
I just don't want to feel abandoned.
Right. Right.
And so what you're telling me is emotional fitness is being comfortable with the emotion at all times, triggered or
Mm-hmm.
not. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because it's there, right? I mean, it's there. It's a deep,
Sure.
there is literally a book called The Primal Wound. It's a deep wound. But even if you have a deep wound or you have like the death by a thousand pinpricks, right? They pop up in relationships
Mhm.
unless you completely isolate yourself, which is not really conducive to the human brain. But it's there. And I think bringing it out, and that's why people, therapists are always like, you should journal. What they're saying to journal so that you can do more preventative measures. They're saying to, sit in 5 minutes of meditation because they know the ugly's coming, right? You don't
Yeah.
need to think about your abandonment. Go sit 5 minutes in silence and you start to feel the uncomfortable sensations just rising, right? That's where you want to do the work. So I think that if I can give you some colors to think of, it's really helpful. But when I work with children, we look at this scale of like the green zone,
Mhm.
right? And the green zone isn't necessarily being completely calm, but it's just being regulated. In the green zone state, you are more responsive than reactive. And then you have the yellow, which is the space between green and red, which is red is your like you're feeling abandoned. It's intense. Like it's usually like
Mhm.
what we call hyper aroused. It's rage or it's a panic. The brain is moving quite fast. And so
Mhm.
there's this yellow in between that. And so from a scale to 0 to 10, red being your 8, 9, 10, yellow's like that 5 and 6. And then eventually, once you get to red, or some people kind of bypass red quite quickly, you get into hypo-aroused, which is more shut down,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
And so it's still a 10 essentially, but it's more of like the brain is just going, this is way too much. I'm going to just shut it all down. I'm going to like detach, dissociate, go numb. And I ask every single child and their parent, what is the worst zone? Out of all those colors, which one's the worst? My red zone people be like, oh, it's the red. It's the red. And my blue zone people are like, oh, it's the blue. And I had one kid that got it right. And he was like, it's the
Yellow sounds tough.
it's the
Yeah.
yellow. It's the yellow because the brain gets to release it. I can tell you to F off in red, and I feel a release right away.
Mm-hmm.
I can shut it down in blue and I feel a release right away. But yellow is that like scratchy feeling on the brain. It's not as intense as red, but it doesn't go away as fast. And so working in the yellow is the golden spot, but it's the spot people, really want to avoid and have a hard time with.
So for my clarification, so emotional fitness is being able to work in the yellow.
Yep.
It's not about the red
Yeah.
or the blue.
Mm-mm.
And hopefully if I'm able to manage the yellow better,
Mm-hmm.
then the reds don't come as fast or not
Mm-hmm.
as strong. The blues don't come as strong.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not as shut down.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
The goal is the yellow, and only focusing on that, because then if you get caught up with the red and the blue, you set yourself up to fail, and you actually create a bigger yellow. So like, I'm going to try to get rid of those panic attacks at red. That's not neurologically, that's going to be really challenging to do. And you're going to fail eventually. And then you're going to say, gosh, I am really unsafe, or I can't do this, or, oh no, I can't control my brain. And then the panic attack is kind of scared of the panic attack, right? And then you're creating with your mindset this bigger yellow. So now you're saying, oh, my panic attacks are getting worse, or I'm going from 0 to 10. Well, no, your just green is quite small and your yellow is quite big. And so it's moving right into that red zone. And so I think if people can value the yellow, then they'll do the work. If I can explain it to people where I say, look, that's your golden spot. And if you can sit in a 5 or 6, imagine what you'll look like in a 10. But I think the hard thing is that active choice to take it off the shelf and sit in it because when you're pulling it off the shelf and you're choosing to sit in it, it's not going to be a 10 because no one did anything to trigger you. Right. You're just kind of sitting in like a 5-minute meditation, maybe. Let's say you're doing that for your emotional fitness. There's going to be something that rises up, right? Yeah. Or maybe you're just choosing to catch yourself in yellow instead of in 10 before it gets there. You're going to start to feel the stuff rise up, and your brain's going to want to go, we got to get it out. So your brain is actually going to take you to a 10 so it can release. And you're like, no, I'm not going to be the little bitch of my brain. I tell clients, like, don't be the slave to your brain. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the yellow zone for a second.
Okay.
If that's where we need to camp, then I think that's where we need to talk, right? So what would you say to somebody like myself who maybe doesn't have a lot of awareness of that emotion getting into the yellow, and then like maybe all I'm aware of in the moment is the red because I've become so accustomed to this feeling of abandonment that I may not have an awareness of the cliff until I've fallen off.
Absolutely. So I think it's about mindfulness. So I think you don't have to overthink it. You don't have to go, okay, let me start to become more aware of all the little tiny abandonment triggers, because that actually doesn't make sense, right? Abandonment's a big wound. And so looking for that in yellow doesn't really translate. When you feel abandoned, it's going to be red, right? So it's just looking for any emotion that creates dysregulation for you. And you can start with boredom. You can start with, and I'll give a lot of credits to this guy that's on Instagram. He talks about this all the time. It's like the mental health coach is his little tag on Instagram. But if you can stop picking up your phone in the morning, you're going to feel some dysregulation there. Like you just start to change tiny little behaviors. So when you get back from work and you're like really stressed and you're tired and you're bored, you had a rough day, and you go to pick up your phone and you stop yourself and you go, no, I'm just not going to pick it up for 10 minutes. Those things are working emotional fitness. And you might go, how is that going to help with my abandonment? Well, it's getting your brain used to just being in a state of regulation, right? And so you don't have to have a lot of awareness to do this. right? You just have to look at
Mhm.
those behaviors that you do that avoid any emotion, right? Because if you can't handle boredom and you can't handle day-to-day stress and you can't handle someone cutting you out in traffic, and I get it, like I have a low window of tolerance sometimes too. But if you can't expand your window on those little things, like come on, man, we're not doing abandonment wounds, right?
Right.
We're not like that's not where we're starting. We're not going to like start running a marathon and we ate donuts for 2 weeks, right? So I think it's like looking at your day. I promise you're doing something to avoid some yuck, and we're
Yeah.
gonna start feeling the yuck. We're gonna start feeling the yuck, right?
We're
Because
gonna embrace
we're
the
gonna
suck.
we're gonna embrace the suck, and that's
Okay.
strength, man. That's the strength.
That's a tall order for some.
Yeah.
Um, okay. So, what are some common things that you see in people that can help them distract from feeling any of these big trigger emotions that you see?
Gosh, I mean, so many things, right? So I think I would say let's look at relationships. So in relationships, let's say you are afraid of abandonment or you're afraid of rejection, and you start doing these people pleasing type behaviors, right? To make sure that your loved one stays not angry with you so that you can feel loved. So those are some ways you're avoiding the rejection. And unfortunately, you're telling the brain that you're feeding that core distortion, right?
Mm,
Because the brain for you, right, is saying, if I am abandoned again, or if I'm rejected, I'm going to be abandoned, and if I'm abandoned, I'm going to die. Because the
mhm.
brain is survival. It's like death, not death,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Or it feels like death,
Hmm.
right? And the truth is that you will be rejected again, most likely.
Fun.
You cannot be abandoned again,
Right.
right? No matter if people leave or not, right?
Hmm.
Your brain doesn't really believe that or know that to be true because it's stuck in a younger time frame, right?
Yeah.
And the truth is you can handle it and you're not going to die. Now, it may feel like you can't handle it, but feelings aren't facts, right? And so I think what happens is the brain gives you this narrative, this brain gives you this story, and then you or other people, right, that have similar fears of rejection, they'll start to do these things to keep themselves safe, these defense mechanisms.
Hmm.
But engaging in these defense mechanisms also feed the brain and go, well, I got to people please, so I must need to avoid rejection. And if I need to avoid rejection, there must be some unsafety around rejection. So it's looking at what you do to defend against the core wound that you have and slowly starting to change those things. You don't want to like take all the defenses out and be left with this raw wound. That's not what I'm suggesting. I'm just saying, like, okay, if I have a difficulty dealing with stress and I'm always on my phone, then let's start to slow that down. If I am scared of rejection and I'm people pleasing, we need to be mindful of that. If
Mm,
I'm asking for reassurance because I always think I'm fat or whatever, we need to be mindful of that, right?
hmm.
And because if I get reassurance, then I tell my brain my body is my worth.
Yeah.
So find the core. I'm
Okay.
telling you, you're feeding it.
Okay. That makes sense. So, like an example with me would be, I know, say back in college,
Mm-hmm.
um, I was not real comfortable with being alone
Mm-hmm.
ever,
Mm-hmm.
and I always had to be around somebody because if I got alone, I had my thoughts,
Right. Of course.
and I honestly didn't like myself very
Mhm.
much. And so, if I stayed around people, I didn't have to deal with that, right?
Mhm.
So what you're telling me is, if I was talking to old college me, hey, let's sit in that space for a little bit and be mindful of the emotions that you have and maybe bring in some logic
Mm.
into the fact that you're not being abandoned in this moment.
Mhm.
You're not alone.
Mhm.
You're just alone right now.
Right.
And then get more comfortable sitting in a space of, say, nothing,
Mhm.
which was my core fear, right?
Yeah.
And teaching my brain that I wasn't going to die.
Absolutely. Yeah, and if you want to step by step, okay, let's say you're, in your dorm or whatever in college and you're alone and the thoughts starts come up and you're like you pick up your phone, you start like texting your friends to go and have a party or to have some sort of social event to bypass, to get rid of those thoughts, right?
Mhm.
You are now making decisions in your emotion. You're making
Mhm.
decisions in your fear,
Mhm.
right? And so if you can stop even just for 5 minutes, 3 minutes and go, no brain, we're not unsafe. We're not a kid anymore. And then you can do something, right? Whether if you want to do journal, that's up to you. I like to do breath work just because it's easy. I'm like,
Right.
breathe 5 times, right? And when you do breath work, it's not about getting yourself to feel calm because like that takes a lot of practice to do breath work to get to calm.
Mhm.
What you're doing is when the brain is afraid, it starts to shallow breathe, just naturally, right? So if a
Mhm.
tiger comes into this room, I'm going to start to breathe shallow, so will you.
Mhm.
And so if you can breathe just a little bit deeper, the brain goes, wait, hold on, I'm so confused. I see a tiger, but she's breathing deeper. Like, is the tiger safe? And it starts to trick the brain of like, wait, is rejection safe? Is abandonment safe? And so when you deep breathe, it's about proving to your brain that like, bro, we're not dying, right?
Yeah.
We can handle rejection, we can handle being alone, and we're going to sit here for 3 minutes, and then you can pick up your phone and go hang out with your friends. It's just doing something where you become the general and you become in charge and you become the leader of this brain, and you don't become this puppet on your brain's little strings of survival mode.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. So, all right, let's dive a little deeper into this
Sure.
because I think you brought up something that's really important. I know we've talked about it
Mm-hmm.
before. It's this notion that my brain does not understand language; it understands experience, and I think that's what you're trying to say, right? It's like I could sit there and tell myself all day
Yeah.
long, I'm not being abandoned,
Sure.
but my brain doesn't recognize that.
Correct. It I mean, yes, it hears language. You can do self-talk. I think affirmations are great. I think mantras are great, but it is just, you're like filling up a big hole with a tiny little band-aid when you use
Mm,
just words, right?
okay.
So behaviors are the impact. And I mean, that's true for all humans. Like I can say something and if my behavior does the opposite, you're going to see the behavior. And the brain's the same way. The behavior holds so much weight.
Mm,
So, yeah, you can say, hey, you're alone right now. That doesn't mean you're dying. Last time you were alone, your mom was walking out the door and it felt like death. It felt
yeah.
awful because children need their parents to survive, right? Hey, you're an adult now. You could tell your brain all that, and what you'll start to see happen is this internal war, right? This internal conflict, and your brain go, no, it's not true. None of your friends like you. Nobody's here. Nobody's even answering your phone. Wait, whatever. You'll see this internal war. And
Mhm.
so, really, I would not suggest just jump into that crazy circus that the brain is trying to do and just stop and go, no, I'm going to prove to you that I'm safe. I'm going to prove to you I can handle it. I'm going to prove to you that I'm strong.
Yeah, something as simple as breathing.
Yeah. I'm going to prove to you that I don't need you to protect. Thank you. Right. I
Mhm.
don't need you to protect me anymore because I'm an adult now.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah. So, how then do you speak to, say, these distortions, right?
Mm.
Because I would consider now going through as much therapy and doing the work that I do with
Hmm.
trauma, um, that this abandonment wound that I have that was real.
Sure.
I was abandoned.
Absolutely.
Um, was not a distortion,
Hmm.
right? And so then I have numerous other examples of this abandonment in my life. It's reinforced. It's no longer a distortion, it's a reality.
Yeah.
But here I am, almost 42 years old, and now it is a distortion,
Hmm.
but it was a reality.
Right.
How do you speak to somebody who may have a similar experience? As I go through this emotional fitness, we go, okay, it's a distortion, and they go, well, now hold on a second, because it did happen. It's a reality.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great question because I have a lot of clients that go, "Well, no, my brain's not lying to me. I was
Right.
almost killed, or I was killed, or I mean, not killed. I was like my life was threatened, or I was abandoned." Right? And it's like, yes, but the brain is trying to tell you that if that happens again, that you will die. Like survival brain is just keeping you alive, right? If it thinks the feeling is going to kill you, right? So it can be real, right? Well, you won't be abandoned again, but you can be rejected. Like you can't have people leave you. You can't have your child never talk to you again. Like it can happen, right?
Right.
Unfortunately.
So what you're saying is like, yes, I can't be abandoned again by my mother.
Sure.
That happens once, it's
Right.
done.
Right.
Right. And that's what you're saying. Because I certainly can be abandoned again, but what you're telling me is with that abandonment wound where it originated, like mom can't leave again.
No, and I honestly would argue you can't be abandoned again because abandonment is more of a child wound, right? But you can absolutely be rejected again, and you can
Gotcha.
absolutely be left again, and you absolutely can. Your children cannot talk to you again, right? And that will feel like abandonment. But the brain takes it a step further and goes, and we're going to die. And even if you're not having the thought, right? We're
Mhm.
going to die. Your physiological system is experiencing that because you wouldn't have to go into fight, flight, freeze, right?
Mhm.
To protect yourself if the brain didn't think that it wasn't surviving. And I think that's the biggest piece is yes, you could be rejected by your wife, right? She could literally go, ew, gross, whatever. Or
Mhm.
yes, you could be rejected by your husband, right? But it's the brain is going, and we're going to die. And you're going, no, I can handle this. No, I love
Yeah.
myself enough,
And
right?
that's what sends us into the red zone is this notion that we're going to die, is
Mhm.
what you're telling me, right?
Yeah, yeah, so the brain goes into panic and it starts or blue zone. I mean, some people are more blue zone people, but your brain goes into I'm there's a threat in the external world
Mhm.
and I'm going to protect myself. And I go, no brain. There's not a threat to the external world. And in other moments, if I'm in the middle of an alleyway and I'm getting mugged, I'm going to go, yes, brain, there's a threat to the external world. You take over and
Yeah.
protect me, right? But not, that's not usually the case. Usually it is a past event that's bringing the threat.
Yeah. So it's like I almost think about and tell me if this is right. Like, um, this is a fight, flight, or freeze
Right.
response, right? My
Mm-hmm.
brain is telling me you're under threat. You're going to die when these big triggered wounds
Mm-hmm.
get hit.
Mm-hmm.
And so our goal is to sit in those and get a little bit more comfortable with them and recognize, hey, I'm not going to die. It's not as big a threat anymore as it
Mm-hmm.
once was. And I almost think to, some of the work that I've done with some of my veterans,
Mm-hmm.
um, where we have this sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
And, everybody's resting heart rate is about 100 beats a minute. But if we checked our heart rate right now, it would not be
Mm-hmm.
100 beats a minute because we have our parasympathetic nervous system that's engaged and it kind of holds everything down.
Right.
But now I get triggered in this wound, or somebody cuts me off in traffic, or,
Mm-hmm.
something that triggers that endorphin rush. Now, parasympathetic nervous system releases
Mm-hmm.
survival response, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now my heart rate is jumped up and I start to break down my cerebral cortex. I don't have the higher thinking that I
No, yeah,
usually
you
do in
don't.
calm, right? And
Right.
so now I'm operating out of fight, flight, or freeze. It's this
Mm-hmm.
primal brain, and it only has one job, and that is to survive.
Correct.
And so what you're telling me is that through emotional fitness, and I almost think to, again, like our troops, um, they are put through, hopefully, some of them I have not had this experience, but hopefully before deployment, going into wartime, going into battle, they are put through iteration upon iteration upon iteration of these things that they could encounter
Mm-hmm.
in battle so that when it does happen, they don't have that immediate response and then get that tunnel vision.
Absolutely.
And so this is kind of the epitome of emotional fitness, right?
Sure.
Is being able to stay more calm,
Mm-hmm.
to regulate your system when it's calm,
Mm-hmm.
so that I'm not operating at a 5 all the time. It doesn't take much to get to a 10.
Yeah.
That I can operate from a 2.
Yeah. Well, just simply just proving to your brain that you can handle it. I think to
Mm,
make it really simple, I think that we need to start looking at our definition of strength and really, modifying that because unfortunately, when I work with clients, strength is typically whenever you can handle the red zone and ignore every other feeling. And that isn't strength, right? That
mhm,
is you just engage the hypoarousal system. You just numbed yourself out,
mm,
right? And honestly, any pretty healthy brain can do that. It doesn't take much work for that. I can desensitize my brain enough. I could teach my brain to dissociate. It's not actually that challenging to
yeah,
do that, right? You can just, give me enough trauma and I'll just check out and that'll be really easy. But then I'm now having a hard time engaging the happy emotions.
right.
I don't I've now lost control over my brain. And so I think we create this a level of strength is avoiding the emotion. But when we say that, when we even think that or we tell that to our children, you don't avoid things that aren't scary. So we're essentially in the same breath saying emotions are scary. So when
Yeah.
we say, hey, little boy, because it happens with boys more often, don't cry. It's not that big of a deal. You're not hurt. We're saying, oh my God, that emotion is so scary. Please don't feel it
Mm,
because then I'm going to feel it and I
yeah.
can't handle it. And that's really essentially, you may not like this, what you're saying, because you don't have to avoid things that aren't scary. It's like, oh, ouch, that looked like it hurt. Okay, take a deep breath. Can you walk on it? Do you need some help? No? Need some help? All right, I'll help you. I'll join you. We'll walk, we'll do the hard things still. We're not going to go, oh, it's not even hurting you. And what happens when you do that in those moments is you kind of like fragment the kid to themselves. Like they lose a part of themselves. They feel even crazier. They go, wait, it does hurt. And my grown up, who's supposed to know all,
Yeah.
is saying it doesn't hurt. So I guess it doesn't hurt. Okay, I'm just going to numb that out. And
Mm,
then you get a really angry or depressed adult. Um, and essentially to me, it's just a fear of feeling is really what anger and depression is.
yeah. No, it actually brings up a really good point about this notion of dissociation, right?
Mhm.
Because can't, quote unquote emotional fitness and dissociation feel the same sometimes, right? Because the whole goal is we're saying to be more comfortable in the trauma or in the emotions.
Mhm.
But dissociation does that to me. So how do I make the distinction between dissociation and emotional fitness?
So I think dissociation is not more comfortable in the emotion. I think dissociation is you're not feeling the emotion. And that's the
Mm,
difference. You'll know when you're doing emotional fitness. So, for example, let's go back to working out. If you did a workout for the first time in years and you've been sitting on your butt all year long and you aren't a little bit sore or you don't feel something from it, you're going to question, did I even do anything? And
mhm,
how did I even build muscle if that's the goal? This muscle has to, like, kind of tear and repair.
mhm.
You don't want to be so hardcore where you can't walk the next day because then you're not going to want to do it anymore. But you feel something.
Mhm.
And so that's the difference. Association would be time and time you just shutting it down and you're not really feeling something. You'll know. I mean, to me, it's easy because then you will not feel happy either.
Mm,
You won't feel happy. Um, and you won't be in control, right?
yeah.
And so when you're doing emotional fitness, and again, you're starting in fours and fives, you're not starting in tens, and you go, okay, so I'm going to, um, you know, I'm going to sit in the fact that I feel like I gained weight or something. I'm going to throw something, that women struggle with. And I'm just going to, put the red dress on and I'm going to go out anyway. And I'm going to do the behavior and I'm going to breathe and do the thing. I'm gonna have a flooding of thoughts of you look fat, people are staring at you, look at that chunky roll, don't you feel it, right? Like it's gonna boom, my brain's gonna
Sure.
come at me, doom, 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 right? And I'm gonna go, no, I'm staying here, I'm just staying I'm not gonna get up and leave this restaurant or whatever, I'm not gonna change, I'm not gonna do these things, I'm gonna breathe through it, I'm not gonna listen to you. Now, the thoughts aren't going away, and dissociation is the lack of thoughts.
Gotcha.
Because you can't really take away your survival brain. You can't pluck it out and throw it away. It just is what it is. So the
Right.
thoughts are going to come. And you're going to listen, you're going to hear the thoughts. You can listen to the thoughts. You're just not going to do what they tell you to do.
Yeah.
So if you do what they tell you to do, you have become their little puppet, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're not in control. But if you do what you want to do, you do your value. I'm staying in this, my value is courage in this moment, and I'm going to stay at this restaurant, right? You can still stay and feel fat.
Mm-hmm.
The feeling doesn't change. You're just observing the feeling. You're just observing the thoughts, and you're still staying in the course of action that you value and that you told yourself you wanted to do.
Yeah. So I don't know why I'm thinking about this, but let's just go down this road.
Okay.
Monsters Inc.
Okay.
Right? Mike Wazowski, he's bottling up screams to power their city, right? And so they've learned that fear powers their city, but then through the course of the movie, they learn that actually laughter powers it exponentially more.
Sure.
And so it just changes the complete paradigm of the entire, culture, right?
Yeah.
Would you say that, the same holds true for us as humans, is that yes, fear powers us, and yes, those fear responses are really strong. But if I've got somebody, say like myself, who has, experienced, tremendous abandonment and rejection from those like core people in your life, that actually the emotional fitness that I'm going to struggle with probably the most is going to be love.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I love that metaphor. It made me think of, that it's all about energy. And I think sometimes we think shame energy and, pain, yes, will help you grow, but we think of pain more like shame and punishment. We think that that energy is going to, help us get motivated and help us grow. And I'm not saying it can't, because it can, but you're not actually in charge. Right? The growth happens because you put the brain into survival mode and it had no other choice. You told the brain like that, you use shame, like you're worthless, you're not good enough, and it has no other choice but to fight. Now, some people experience the opposite and they just shame themselves into freeze, right? And that's why it's not a guaranteed thing to do, right? But we still do it with our children. We think, oh, they have to feel the pain to learn the lesson. I hear that all the time, but they have to feel the punishment really big to learn the lesson. And it's just not true, because really it's the energy of courage that's going to learn the lesson. It's the energy of compassion that's going to learn the lesson. It's like, yes, we're going to teach the skill in this moment. We're not going to make you, kind of punished and, feel ashamed. But we think that strength comes from that more negative energy, just like the Monsters Inc., right? Versus the laughter. And that's why, to your point, people are uncomfortable with the love. It's because we used shame and punishment to motivate them. And they go, and the brain goes, what is this? I've never felt this before. How can this possibly be? Right?
And so if you've never felt it before, how on earth can you give it to yourself?
Sure. And the brain sees it as a threat at first. And emotional fitness might be around love. It might be like, I'm going to sit and I'm going to say to myself, I love myself, which sounds so cheesy, 5 times, 3 times a day. And you're going to be like, whoa, gross. This is so stupid. Why am I doing this?
That's very Stuart Smalley.
Yeah. Yeah. Why am I doing this? This is stupid, right? Or I am worthy, or I am important, or I can handle rejection or whatever. And if that feels very gross to you, you're like about to throw up in your mouth, you can try the what if technique. You could do, what if I felt worthy today? What if I saw some importance in myself today, right? Where the brain now with the what if will then go and try to look for it, because it can't handle a question being not answered. The brain's very very logical. It's like, what if I saw gratitude today, and the brain's going to be like, scan for gratitude, right? It can't leave it unanswered. So if the I am grateful feels really out of your window of tolerance, start with the what if. But really, to speak to your point, you might have to have emotional fitness around love. And yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I like that what if
What if?
exercise. That's really good. And
Yeah.
so it's now engaging curiosity,
Yep.
which curiosity inherently is a childlike
Sure.
characteristic. Yes.
Sure. Sure.
Interesting. So maybe a piece of emotional fitness for people listening is to just get curious.
Yeah.
And maybe that's where they start. It's not going through those behaviors, yes, but
Hmm.
hey, what if?
Yeah.
What if I went through that behavior?
Yeah.
What would that look like?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. We can learn a lot from children. And I think we don't want to embrace that we can learn a lot from children because we hate our inner child, right?
mhm,
If you ever see someone be really harsh on their child, it's not because they're a bad person, they hate their inner child, right? But
mm,
children are very free spirited and they're messy and they,
mhm,
are not responsible. But, that's our organic nature of being human is sometimes we should be having fun and we should be free spirited. And of course, there's a time and a place, but I think we try to teach them to be prepared for this boring, robotic adult world. And we don't value those character traits that they have that actually can make them great adults or makes the society a great society, like being free spirited or being vulnerable. Oh my gosh, we hate vulnerability, but
yeah,
children are so vulnerable
yeah,
and they need our protection. But we're so scared of that and threatened by that if we were never taught to be vulnerable, that when our child cries, instead of allowing them to be vulnerable, we go, oh my God, they have to be tough. No, you had to be tough,
mhm,
right? Their toughness comes from the vulnerability. Their
yeah,
freedom comes from the being free spirited,
yeah,
right? And what we do is we hate on these beautiful, like natural child characteristics, and we create our fear. Now we have a hardened adult. Now we have a narcissistic adult.
yeah,
Now we have a codependent adult, and we have an adult that's lost their true self and they can't find their way because we, instead of taking the opportunity to be inspired by these beautiful character traits and help them go towards a path of healthiness, right, we see them as a threat and we're afraid of them, and we force this notion of strength that's false, um, creating wounds and teaching them to hide the things that are so great within them.
yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. I think in my practice, I see a lot of people who use shame as a
Mhm.
motivator for
Mhm.
themselves
Mhm.
and try to beat the weakness out of them because our culture is teaching people that weakness is bad and I must turn it into a strength. But
Mhm.
unfortunately, some of these things that we struggle with as humans, these deep core wounds that we carry, it's just going to be a weakness. It's just something that is inherent, and we can't really turn that into a strength. And maybe that's not the goal. Maybe the goal is to be comfortable within the weakness, to embrace my humanity, to embrace the suck, as we say, be messy.
Mhm.
And now my shame is not engaged as much because I'm seeing both sides of my personality now. I'm seeing
Sure.
that, yes, I was abandoned, and yes, I have that wound, and that's not going away.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I'm also tremendously loved by my family now
Right.
because of all these wonderful characteristics. And maybe perhaps those characteristics that I possess today are because of this wound.
Yeah, absolutely. But I do disagree that we embrace the weakness and we don't need the strength. I think embracing the weakness is the strength. And I
Right.
think that's what people are missing is their definition of strength is being hard and seeking power and aggressively going through life. And if you have to be hard to keep yourself safe, you are weak. If you have to seek power, you have none.
Mm.
If you have to say you're awesome, you're not.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that through experience. That's exactly, I came, that's my personality, like aggressively go through life. And we're not going to forgive people that's weak. We're not going to give them the pleasure of even getting forgiveness until I saw something that said the guarded heart that doesn't forgive is a victim. And I was like, no.
Ooh.
Ooh,
Ooh.
right?
Yeah.
The villain is the victim.
Interesting.
The villain is the victim because they create their fear
Mm-hmm.
by always kind of trying to stay on top. You're telling the world you feel like you're on the bottom. You don't need to make yourself big if you don't feel small. You just be.
Oh, I like that.
And that's the strength. And I'm just saying to those out there, I mean, I know I'm kind of switching your mindset a little bit, but if you can just be with yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
5 minutes, let's do one time a day and then move it to, 2 times a day, whether that's a journal, that's a meditation, or that's a just pick an emotion. I'm just going to sit with anger for 5 minutes, right? And I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
feel it in my body and I'm just going to breathe. I'm going to have a memory that triggers the anger and I'm just going to sit and I'm going to deep breathe, right? When you just be with yourself and you sit with the wound, you are the epitome of strength. Because if you can sit in the brokenness and bring light to it, how else would you define strength than that?
Yeah, I like that. I almost think about, we were told, or I was told as a kid, that uh, it takes a stronger person to walk away from the bully or
Mm,
the fight because
mm-hmm.
they're still going to be jawing at you
Sure.
than it is to go and fight it. And so this fight, flight, freeze response is likened to us going and throwing that punch. But the
Mm-hmm.
harder thing for us to do and the more powerful thing for us to do is to sit in the emotion that we have in that moment of being bullied,
Right.
recognize the truth and untruth in that moment, be able to sit through my emotions
Mm-hmm.
and come out better and stronger so that the next time it happens, it's almost like I don't even hear them.
Yeah. And it's not about not standing up for yourself. It's
Sure.
not about not being assertive. I think that where we get it wrong is we look at the three ways we communicate, right? We look at passive, assertive, and aggressive. And passive is saying, I respect you, I don't respect me.
Mm-hmm.
And so the passive people will always say, I give and give and give and give and give, and I'm not appreciated, but you're not really giving to yourself,
Right.
right? Or you're giving with the strings of getting,
Mm-hmm.
right? And an aggressive person will say, I respect me, but I don't really respect you.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. And so there's just no two way. Where assertiveness is you can absolutely stand up to the bully and you can use your voice, which is your power, and you can use your feeling, which is your power. I say that all the time to people, right?
Yeah.
I love doing boundary work because I go, well, you can say, like, no, I'm angry. And then the
Mm-hmm.
person will get defensive and try to convince you that you're not. And you go, wait, hold on. I'm not saying you intended to do X, Y, and Z, but I'm angry. That's not changing. So let me breathe, let me sit in it, and we'll come back and have this conversation. But I'm not going to allow you to talk me out of my emotion. And that's your strength.
Mm-hmm.
That's your assertive, and that's your voice. Right. But I think we think aggression is the stronger piece.
Well, it certainly feels stronger,
It
right?
feels strong.
Yeah.
That's why I love my anger, because it feels stronger. When you start doing the more assertive stuff, when you start doing the emotional fitness, you'll feel like this anxiety come in, and that's going to feel quite weak. When I'm angry, I don't really feel the anxiety at all. But when I have to do something more assertive, especially if there's a vulnerability to it where I'm sharing an emotion or just being real, I can't hide behind the mask of anger anymore. It doesn't feel as powerful,
Yeah.
but it is.
So, like, if my MO is have this feeling. Now I'm going to put myself in shame for
Mm,
having this feeling, which feels shame is also can feel powerful, or it is a pretty powerful motivator.
yeah,
Um,
it
and
can.
it works, right? Because it gets me out of it, but I also feel kind of yucky
Sure.
afterwards. That if I really do this well, if I get to this space where I'm more quote unquote emotionally fit,
Hmm.
that I can give myself something much more powerful than shame, and that is compassion.
Right. And I think when you look at shame, shame motivates me. If I'm in shame, I can lose weight rather quickly because shame is an intensity. Well, shame for me will bring in anger, and anger for me will bring an intense workout, and I'll get the results that I want. And that's why it's hard to break that pattern. But I think if you think about it from a strength perspective, shame's running the show. So you can't really take credit for your workout, bro. Like shame ran the show.
Yeah.
Shame did the work. You didn't do the work. And I'm saying you become the general, right? These are just parts that are trying to protect you, and you don't allow the parts to do the work. You do the work. And yes, of course, if the parts do the work, there are some emotions that linger that feel yuck. But if you're kind of one of those people that stay in anger, like I can do, you're not ever going to really feel the yuck. You just keep going back to the anger loop, going back
Yeah.
to the anger loop. But if you can say, you know what, I want to take control over my life. I want to manage my emotions. I want to be the boss of my brain. Then you grab shame by the hand, okay,
Mhm.
and you decide to do that workout. You grab anger by the hand and you decide to go for a run, right?
Yeah.
You're not going in a state of someone just rejected me and I am so angry and I'm going to go run 3 miles and lose a bunch of weight and they're going to see what they lost, right? I don't
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
know, because now your jealousy and shame and anger are kind of running the show. Even if you can bypass it a little bit, no, I'm going to sit here for 5 minutes. I'm going to deal with the need for revenge. I'm going to deal with the shame for 5 minutes. Then I'm going to go run. I'm not saying don't go run. I'm just saying wait and let the general, which is you, kind of step forward
Yeah.
and then go for the run. Those emotions will still be there
Sure.
for
But you're
sure.
going from a space of, say, motivation or compassion or.
Maybe not because you're not there with them. Honestly, maybe not because you're not
Okay.
there with the emotional fitness. Maybe you're still running in a state of shame and whatever, but you did one behavior to show the brain, no, I can sit in it for 5 minutes, because
Mm-hmm.
the brain is saying, go run,
Mm-hmm.
go get the revenge, go do the thing, because that thing is going to keep you safe. And what you did is go, no, I can sit here for 5 minutes. I don't need you to keep me safe or to give me these thoughts to keep me safe.
Right.
And so, yes, both and, right?
Yeah.
And as you become more emotionally fit, then you will be the one running versus the emotion.
So that's the goal,
That's the
right?
goal, but
Yeah.
that you're not going to get there right away.
Sure.
And just know that when you listen to your brain and you don't do anything to bypass it and you go for that run, you're going to get a hit of dopamine.
Sure.
And what the brain is going to hear, or the brain's going to see, is when she seeks revenge, she feels safe. So I'm going to give her more insecurities. I'm going to give her more anxiety. I'm going to give her more fears so she can go out and seek more revenge and so we can feel safe. So the brain is actually going to feed you more of what you don't want. If you keep getting in these patterns of feeding it, it's
So
like,
reconditioning the
oh,
brain.
yeah, that cookie
Yeah.
felt good. Well, I'm going to give you more hunger then.
Yeah. No, that's good. So we're reconditioning the brain,
Mm,
essentially. That's good. I picture, we talk about this notion of energy
yeah.
and how shame operates pretty much next to death.
Yeah. It's a low, low energetic emotion.
But even anger is higher. But,
Yes.
compassion and love and mutual respect and those kinds of things are the highest of
Mm-hmm.
vibrations,
Yeah.
right? And so with
Yeah.
emotional fitness, hopefully our goal is to vibrate a little bit higher.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that because we have proof, like neurological. We could scan the body and look at the energy and when they're feeling these emotions and see that yes, those higher level emotions like love, compassion, or stronger than such a low energetic level, which is shame. And so I think this notion of tough love we have so wrong, right?
Yeah.
We think that we treat people harshly and that's tough love. And so I have a lot of, clients that are, kind of military in their parenting,
Mhm.
and they're like, this is how you should treat children, and it's tough love. And it's yes and no. The
Mhm.
thing that the military does right, is it makes people do hard things. I mean, you're getting out of your comfort zone. You're waking up early. You're, at the edge of your exhaustion, and you're fighting past it, right?
Mhm.
That's the hard part that creates this strength, which what we're saying in emotional fitness. You're taking yourself to the edge of that abandonment. You're working through it,
Sure.
right? But you're doing it from a space of love. And
Mhm.
if you're doing it from a space of fear, that's not tough love. So if you're saying you see it on the movies,
Mhm.
dirty little maggot, give me 20 push-ups, that's not tough love, right? If you're like, give me 20 push-ups, you got this, you can do this, right? And then when they do it, no, give me one more. I know you got one more in you, right? That's tough love. And
Mhm.
I really want people to hear this, because the way we treat our children changes the society that we have.
Sure.
And so we're all, not we all, but like a lot of my clients are upset because they deem this society softer, and they blame it on softer parenting, which might be true.
Sure.
But softer parenting isn't compassion, isn't love. We know from the scans that those are higher type levels of strength,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
The softer parenting is not making them do the hard thing. And so we're like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We're going, oh, let's go back to hardcore parenting, and then our people will be strong. Well, no, back in the like, people always talk about back in the day.
Mhm.
Back in the day, people did the hard thing because they didn't have cell phones. They walked to school.
They
They
had
did
to.
hard things. That's why they were tough, not because people treated them like crap.
Right.
So stop treating yourself like crap is my point. Make
Yeah.
yourself do the hard thing with encouraging statements, with you got this,
Yeah.
with, no brain, this isn't true. I don't need to lose weight to be worthy. I'm worthy,
Mhm.
and I'm going to prove to you that I'm worthy,
Yeah.
right?
I
And
like
it
that.
doesn't become a fight with the brain. It's a, hey, thanks for trying to help me out. I got this. I'm worthy. No, I'm not going to pick up my phone and check to see if my husband is cheating, because if he's cheating, I'm going to find out, and I know I'm going to make the decision that's right for me.
Mhm.
I don't need to get into this panic mode plan and try to find my worthiness because I think it's deemed in, monogamy,
Sure.
right? And so that's the idea of tough love when it comes to yourself. It's like making you do the hard thing by not avoiding, but not talking to yourself
Yeah.
like you're a piece of crap.
Yeah. I know that I was guilty of kind of taking that military approach. I mean, I grew up in a military home,
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah. Yeah.
that's how it was, right? And so that's kind of how I started parenting. What I learned through this process is there's a balance to be played between what we call, or what I would call, that military approach, that tough
Sure.
approach, and attachment love.
Mhm.
And tough love is blending the two so that I'm not too far on one side of the pendulum,
Yeah.
right? If it's all attachment and no boundaries, I'm going to get one thing, and it's probably not what I want. If I do
Mhm.
all harsh and, tough,
Mhm.
I'm going to get another thing. That's not really what I want. What I want is somewhere in the middle of what we call tough love, which includes attachment.
It's like, I don't know what movie, maybe it's Varsity Blues, but I'm sure you could think of the movies that have the really inspirational football coach, and
Hmm.
then they have the music and they all like go off on the field, and of course they win the game,
Hmm.
after halftime, and the coach gives this inspirational speech of both, I believe in you, but you're going to get out there and you're going to kick butt and you're going to do something hard. That is a great metaphor of how you should like talk to yourself, talk to your children. They make them do the hard thing,
Right.
but it comes from a state of, I believe in you.
Yeah.
I can do this. I'm not going to give up. And so when you fail, because you'll fail, by the way, when you do an emotional fitness, you'll fail. And
Probably.
then you're going to go, this crap doesn't work and I quit,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The the strength is the trust. No, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to, if you want to speak military terms, I'm going to follow the mission. I'm going to not give up. And you would do hopefully the same for your kid. Your kid's scared of the dark, right? So you're not going to go, there's no monsters here. Suck it up, buttercup, right? That's going to create more trauma. I will tell you, it's going to create more trauma. But you also don't want to go, what? Are you scared? Mommy's here for you. I'm going to stay up here until you're not scared, where you're feeding the brain.
We're not doing the hard thing.
Well, we're not doing the hard thing. What you're going to say is you're going to acknowledge it's scary to be in the dark. It's very scary to be in the dark, but you are safe. And we're going to prove to your brain that you're safe. And mommy's going to sit with you, or daddy's going to sit with you, and we're going to breathe, and we're going to show your brain that you're safe. Yeah. And then you're going to stay by yourself for 2 minutes, right? Whatever is in your child's window of tolerance. Sure. And I'm going to come back and check on you in 2 minutes. I'm going to show you that you're safe. We're going to do the hard thing. And it comes from a place that intention matters. It really matters, because if I got to get this done, and it's a checklist, right? So that this kid doesn't sleep with me anymore, which I get that. Sure. Then you're going to come from a space of frustration. You're going to come from a space of, you're not going to be patient with the child, right? And that energy within you the child will pick up on that. Yeah. Versus if you come from an energy of, I believe you can do it, right? I know this is hard. I'm going to walk with you through the hard water. I'm not going to carry or coddle you through it, but I'm going to join you through it. And that right there seems to be the epitome of emotional fitness and what we're trying to convey, and imagine this child when he's an adult, if this happens over and over and over with this parent and this child dynamic, right? I'm going to sit with you, encourage, because I believe that you can do it. And that's the energy. And I promise you guys, it's going to be really hard for you to do this on your own. It's going to be really hard for you to do this on your own, because nobody did that for you. Correct. So now you have to reparent yourself. And now you have to fight those thoughts of, you can't do this. There's no way. Yeah. You couldn't handle it when she left the first time. There's no way you're handling rejection a second, third, fourth time, right? And so it's like, nope, I'm going to just keep breathing. I'm going to just keep within my window, little bits at a time. Little bits at a time, right? So as we kind of wrap up here, I want to just, if we could give some practical tips to those who are listening. Because I know we've talked a lot about them, they've been kind of scattered throughout. Sure. But if we can kind of bullet point some really practical things for people to do to kind of start this journey of emotional fitness, what would you give them? So I would say first, figure out your goal and only pick one. These overachievers out here, you're going to set yourself up to fail, right? So yours would be abandonment, maybe, right? Mm-hmm. And rejection. Mm-hmm. And so you're going to start being mindful. Second, right? First, figure out the goal. Second is mindfulness. You're just going to start being mindful of when you start to feel those moments of rejection. If you don't want to journal, I totally get people hate journaling, but if you can at least write it down, like grab a piece of paper, like Monday, I was at a 5, or Tuesday, whatever, like you can start to get mindful of like when those feelings are coming up for you, right? You're going to be catching yourself in yellow more often by doing that. Sure. Okay. And if you are so mindless, let's just say you did that and you're like, I didn't notice anything. I'm only noticing 10s. That tells me you have quite a big yellow. And so I would recommend, after you did that for a week and you were not able to find your 5 and 6s, you're going to have to kind of set yourself up for 5 and 6s. You're going to have to wake up and sit in silence, and I promise you it's coming. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to stop picking up your phone, and I promise you it's coming. But the second phase is mindfulness and just being aware. And then the third is coming up with a plan. You can do, it's your life, do what you want to do, right? But I just think breath work is really easy. I do color breathing, breathe in white, breathe out gray. I try to do 5 breaths and then I move on with my day. But you're going to come up with a plan. What's the behavior that you do that you don't like? So if you, like, I can be super bitchy sometimes. So if I go, okay, my goal is I'm going to, anytime I say something that can come off rude, right? I'm going to do 5 breaths, right? Well, at first, I'm not going to notice it until after it's said. I'm just going to still do 5 breaths, right? And I'm bypassing something at that point, whether it's shame, whatever, right?
Mhm.
And then eventually the brain, it's going to catch itself a little bit sooner,
Mhm.
right? Right. And so, so first finding the core, second being mindful, third is coming up with a plan of a behavior you want to change. And
Mhm.
if you can't see that behavior, like you don't even know when you're being, rejecting or whatever, and you want to change that, you can do mindfulness in that as well. But it's, coming up with a plan. And then now the fourth is now it's time to do the work. Right. And so is it the 5 breaths that you want to do? Is it you want to stop and count to 10 before you respond, right? Anything to make the brain not go into that quick, instant gratification. And then I would, somewhere in those 4 phases, try to be really mindful of when you're feeding it. Because if you don't know your plan, if you do this and you're like, I don't really know what I want to change, or I don't know what my plan is, just stop feeding it.
Yeah.
So it sounds complicated, but it's actually quite easy to conceptualize. It's harder to do because now
Sure.
you're doing it throughout the day.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're reprogramming years and years and years of programming. So, yeah, that's going to be really difficult.
Sure. And some of my clients work better with not having one set goal. I mean, I like the goal idea, but some of my clients go, well, anytime I feel anything yuck, I'm going to just breathe 5 times and tell my brain I can handle it. So that's an option too. Some people are just afraid of all the emotions, like anything feeling
Right.
dysregulated. So anytime I feel something, I'm going to watch that I don't impulsively pick up my phone and I'm going to do 5 breaths. So you could just do it that way and create emotional regulation within all the emotions.
Mhm.
And your core is going to start to come out. Like your pattern, you're going to start to figure out, okay, I can breathe through anger. But now I did the breath work with shame and my brain came in
Mm.
like a, force. You
Yeah.
can't do whatever. So it's it's shame that I really need to work on. So I think you can kind of start just with all of them if you want.
The perpetual cycle of emotional fitness. I like
Yeah,
it. Well, thank you so much for taking the time
you're
to talk
welcome.
about this. Stay tuned for more because I'm
Okay,
sure we'll have more conversations about this.
awesome. Yeah, I'm excited. Thank you guys for listening. We are honored to be a part of your wellness journey. For more content and info, follow us, The Elements Wellness, on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, and of course on our website, theelementswellness.com.